You're listening to European Startup Universe Talks, a podcast where we meet with startup founders, angel investors, and major stakeholders of the European startup ecosystem. They let us in on the do's and don'ts of running a startup, their career story, and the process of succeeding as well as failing. In other words, everything of interest to startup nerds. European Startup Universe is a massive network of opportunities for EU tech startup founders, connecting them with the best minds of the EU tech community, with unicorn founders, known investors, and experts. We have brought together European countries to join forces and launch startup programs suitable for their nation's tech founders. ESU aims to give access to opportunity for funding and expansion across EU countries. Welcome to European Startup Universe Talks. I'm Mauriza and I'm here with Alain Bindels. He is an innovation leader in the pharmaceutical industry, focusing on future healthcare technologies, and he's a startup mentor. Welcome.
Very nice to meet you, Mauriza.
Very nice to have you here. I would like us to begin. Could you tell me a bit more about yourself and what you do?
Yes. So I've been working more than 12 years at Roche, and the last 6-7 years I've been focusing on innovation management at Roche, which means I'm really focusing on establishing like entrepreneurship mindset and skills in organizations. So we're focusing on supporting innovation projects, also supporting innovation pilots, but mainly also focusing on creating those skill sets, right, of the future. So people that understand innovation coaching, understand the tools, the methods to make an innovation happen in the company, and of course learn by doing. So we have a lot of innovation programs, accelerated programs that we have set up to really support innovation projects in the company.
Okay, what was it about this field that drew you in?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like innovation management and supporting, digital transformation. It has always been really like a passion of mine. And for me, to stay relevant as an organization, right? And specifically in today's world, to become a health tech company of the future, I think we need to work differently. We need to partner with health tech startups and other tech partners to really create a different healthcare experience. So I'm somewhat intrigued by the pharma industry and I guess also maybe how slow we are maybe in doing this, right? So I was always passionate, like how can we fast track the digital transformation in healthcare, and how can we learn also from startup companies, from different industries on how to do this in healthcare. So I somehow am passionate about innovation, technologies, and also learning from other industries, and how to use those learnings, but then in the pharmaceutical industry, how to implement it.
Yeah, so how is the relationship between the startup field, the startup world, and the pharmaceutical world?
I think it's growing and developing more and more. So for Roche, I've seen the last few years, we have more and more initiatives, like for example, the Roche Cravesphere plug and play program, where we are, supporting startups also in their business development. We have also created, for example, Roche Health, which is really a separate entity, but really focusing on startup support. And we have many different accelerator programs, like the healthcare lab in Eastern Europe, and also the innovation program that I'm running to really also connect better with startups. So I see that we're opening up as a company to work not only with big providers and maybe more the classic partnerships, but more with local health tech startups in countries. So more and more, I would say, openness to collaborate, and also in the countries, right? If I'm looking at the affiliates, the Roche affiliates, we see more and more countries where they're trying to do proof of concepts, pilots locally in the local markets with local providers, with local startups. So I think it's more and more opening up, because we understood the only way to become really a health tech company of the future, it's about partnership, right? We cannot do it alone in isolation. We need to partner with those tech companies and with experts in that field.
Absolutely. It's not the thing that you can do only by yourself. It's really about network in so many different ways.
Exactly. And I think we, of course, are a very, company that exists since a long time, right? 125 years. And our business model has been, of course, in the past, mainly focused on developing, new medicines or developing new diagnostic tests. But now in the new economy, right, in the new digital health economy, it's more about creating digital solutions for patients, for hospitals, for labs, for healthcare providers. And this is a different business model, right? It's new technologies, it's different solutions. So we're not so used, to these digital solutions. So to be faster in those markets, we need to partner with experts that maybe are very expert in that technology field, right? And know how to create those digital experiences. So it's not our traditional pharma model, right? So it's a very new type of business models, which means we need to, again, partner and learn from others in that field.
Absolutely. What is the value of the digitalization of the pharmaceutical world, the healthcare field? What is really the benefits of that?
So for us, it's really important because we speak often about doing for patients. I mean, doing now what patients need next, right? That's our motto. So this means that it's not only about giving patients a new medicine or a new diagnostic test, but it's also understanding the needs of the patients and the healthcare professionals. So these are needs maybe around disease management. This is maybe needs around how to track your own healthcare data or how to use your own healthcare data. It's to provide services that go beyond the molecule, right? Beyond a medicine. So it's really creating a more customer friendly environment, I would say, for the patient, for the doctor that is managing their disease, right? So it means more understanding, like, what are the pain points they're going through on a day-to-day basis? How can we help them to make their life easier, right? Going through the disease. And of course, as we're living in a very digital world, right? Everybody or almost everybody has nowadays a smartphone. We use many digital solutions in our day-to-day life. So why not use also digital solutions when we are managing our healthcare, right? So how do we create a better digital experience for people when they go to the hospital, when they get their treatment? So I would say modernize the healthcare experience.
Okay, that's very, very interesting, and I feel like it's definitely part of the future.
It is, and I think we have seen also after the COVID crisis, right? Like during the COVID crisis, like a lot of patients couldn't go to the hospital. They were relying maybe on digital healthcare or telehealth in connecting with the hospital or with the doctors. So how can we make it easier for patients to use these digital technologies? And learning from COVID now, how can we maybe get inspired of what has happened during the COVID and make it, I would say, more easier for patients to use these digital technologies and make it more accessible. So I think it's a change. It will not happen, of course, overnight, right? It's a long-term process, and therefore we also need to partner with hospitals, with local providers, healthcare insurance companies, with governments, building those partnerships and doing these pilots to validate them. And of course, it's also a change. It's not only a change for the patient, but it's also a change for the doctors, right? Or the healthcare professionals involved. So this means they might need to suddenly start using an app, right? And communicating with the patient. So it's quite a big shift also on the people working in healthcare, right? So, and we shouldn't forget about this, because it takes a lot of change management, like what is the benefit for them? What is, of course, the benefit for the patient, right? That's the most important. But also, how do people in the healthcare industry use those tools? So prepare them, prepare the new doctors, the new nurses, with these tools. So I think it's a lot of change management and preparing people in the healthcare industry for this.
Absolutely, and it's really a relevant topic right now after the COVID situation, that the medical workers are really burnt out and really under so much pressure. So innovations like this could maybe really help them be more efficient, or like relieve them in the workload in a sense.
Exactly. And I think also, from an efficiency point of view, imagine that you as a patient, you don't always have to go to the hospital for specific information. Maybe some of the diagnostic tests can be done from home. You can send in a request, I want to do this and this test, I want this information. You can maybe do some of the diagnostic testing from home, share that information with your doctor, with your primary physician. And information sharing can go in a digital way, right? So you don't have to go every time to the doctor, every time to the office, taking the time off. So how can we make it easier, a better experience for the patient, that your life is less disrupted, being sick or being required to go to the hospital to do all this tests, maybe providing services at home, right? You can really receive support about your disease management from home. You can connect with other patients, share experiences, maybe get support. If you have questions about your disease, you can maybe ask it as well. So all of these things make it more easier for patients to find information, to share their health information with a doctor, receive outcomes, maybe even prescription, right? You can receive the prescription at home. And of course, there's really good examples like Estonia, for example, right? We know that they're very far advanced with digital healthcare, and everything is, fully digitalized, and they have all the systems and the hospital data fully in a digital hub. So what can we learn from those countries, and why are those countries so successful in implementing these models? So I think we can learn a lot from very good examples within Europe as well. And how can we together push that these digital solutions become available in other European countries?
What would you say are your fantasies or your goals for the future? If you imagine 5 or 10 years from now, what would you like it to look like?
Yeah, a little bit like what I was mentioning before, right? So you have all your healthcare data somehow in a digital hub. You can access your healthcare data. So even like 1 year ago, I did a diagnostic test, or I visited a doctor to do a treatment or a diagnosis or research, and all of the information you have as a patient, right, at your fingertips. And if I want to contact another doctor or share my information, you can easily share it with another doctor, get a second opinion, and you're not anymore obliged to go for every little thing to your doctor, to the office, to the hospital. So it means you can save time as a patient, plus you receive more personalized support. So specifically on my case, right, if I have a specific disease or problem, I can reach out to a community of maybe other patients, get the information about the disease. What can I do? How can my life be better? How can I live my life in a more, have a better quality of life, even having the disease? How can I manage, my disease and my data and all of the things, the treatment that I'm taking? So really have a more personalized approach to disease management, that as a patient, it becomes more easy to manage the disease, but also to live with the disease.
That is maybe the goal in the end, to really make, when somebody's suffering from a disease, make it easier for them to handle, to manage it, to live with it.
Yeah, and I think there's great startup companies that are out there that have great technologies that we should start implementing or piloting, in local countries. And once they're validated, once they work well in a hospital or in a country, expand these to other countries, right, and get a approval for these solutions, right? Because of course, with healthcare, there's the challenge that there's a lot of regulatory approvals that are required, right? Every time when we roll out like new solutions, even digital solutions, we need to have regulatory approvals. We need to provide data security, right? Like all of this GDPR related regulations. So it's very important to work with the local governments, right? To make these solutions available. Because even if the technology exists, it doesn't mean that we can bring them to patients because of regulatory boundaries or regulatory regulations, right? So how can we help these startups to overcome these regulatory boundaries and push together as an industry towards a more digital healthcare future?
So would you say that the future of this is not maybe entirely, but to an extent in the hands of startup founders that are working within this field?
I think definitely, because startups, they usually push the boundaries, right? They come with completely new disruptive ideas, with new innovations, maybe that traditional pharma companies are not thinking about. And then when these solutions are being discovered, right, or created, we can then work, for example, with more established pharma or healthcare companies to push then the regulations, right? So we can go together to the European regulators or American regulators and help the startup to validate and to get the approval for these solutions in the local countries. So I think we as a company, as Roche, we can really help the approval process and the regulatory process. And maybe also get more the expansion, right? International expansion across countries, and provide our expertise there. So I see that the startups, they really are pushing the boundaries and pushing the new innovation and disruptive technologies. And this is what we need as an industry, right? I mean, we need to have this disruption and new thinking, fresh ideas coming from the startups. So I think it's very important to have these startups in the ecosystem.
Absolutely, to think really outside the box, to be creative, as you said. But you are a startup mentor / coach. Could you tell me a bit more about that, what that entails for you?
Yeah. So for example, in the healthcare lab, right, is one of our accelerator program with startups. We have, for example, startups in there that join the program. And what I do as a startup mentor, startup coach, is listening to their needs, understanding their challenges, and based upon that also provide coaching, provide feedback, ideas, or connect them with other Roche experts, right? Find the right people in the company that they can work with. So I think it's, on one hand, is supporting them in developing their business model, maybe questions that they have, so really coaching them, or connecting them with other Roche experts that can help them to maybe overcome these challenges. Because I think it's sometimes very difficult if you're a startup company outside and you contact Roche, like it's such a big company, right? Like who do you go to? Who are the people that I can reach out to? Which expertise? And I'm somehow like a bit of a connection point for them to navigate the complexity of Roche, right? Like finding the right experts, the right business units that can help them. But yeah, I really like to coach the startups, because you learn a lot from their way of working. You also see maybe they're struggling with certain things that Roche maybe is not struggling with, right? So you can really be complementary, like provide support and coaching from our experience. And it can really help them, right? It can really move them forward. So I think it's great if you can help the startup ecosystem in moving forward and help a startup, moving one step closer to making their products successful.
Absolutely, and it's not a thing that you can do alone. That you have to have the ecosystem, the support and the guidance of experts, but also getting in contact with others is really what makes the ecosystem grow. When you are mentoring, are there any common mistakes that you see that you would like to just everyone stop doing?
I think it's very important, right, from the start, like to think about your business model, right? Because often when we come up with like new solutions or new technologies, it might be in a really early stage, but you need to think about like who is in the end paying for the solution, right? Who is reimbursing maybe, or is it being reimbursed, for example, by the healthcare authorities? Or for example, who's owning the data, right? So there's a lot of the time like questions around the business model, right? Who's paying, who's owning the data? Is it being reimbursed? And really also checking assumptions early on with your end user or customer, right? So imagine like your end customer is the patient, making really sure that you speak with patients, that you get their insights, test your business plan or your product with them early on, right? So I think sometimes what people forget is, I mean, they have a great solution, great technology, but they didn't test it early enough with real end users, with real customers, getting feedback. So you might have a great solution, but maybe the customer needs something else, right? So really doing that early feedback with the market, with customers, and also the stakeholder management, right? If you think about health authorities, the regulations in the country, approval process, data privacy rules, like all of these things that might seem very far away, but are very critical for your success of your business, right? So early on identifying those regulations that are important for you, the stakeholders that you need to speak with and interact with. Yeah, so on one hand, it's like on the customer side, right? Really doing this customer validation early on. And on the other hand is more the broader, I would say, stakeholders, right? That have an impact on the success of your project. So like I said before, like healthcare authorities, data privacy, these kind of topics, which are often difficult in digital solutions.
Okay, so it's not enough to have a good idea or really be innovative. You also need the external help.
You need the external help, and you need to early on identify like what would be the showstoppers, right? Like if this and this would happen or it doesn't happen, then we cannot sell our solution, or our solution cannot be viable anymore, right? So yeah, really understand like the context, right, that we're operating in at a country level or European level. Yeah, and then overcome those barriers. I mean, there's always a way, of course, to find solutions, but if you're aware early on, then you can start finding solutions, you know, to for example, your business model or data privacy issues or data protection, you know, like there are solutions out there, but maybe you need to be aware early enough so that you can still find different strategies to overcome them.
What would you say are some vital and absolutely must-have skill sets or assets in order to really be successful in this industry?
I think you need to be very persistent and have a can-do attitude, right? Because it's still a relative, I mean, if you think about digital healthcare alone, right, it's still a relatively new field and there's a lot of challenges to overcome. So you need to be in there for the long run, right? Meaning not being afraid of challenges, not being afraid of pivoting your business model or changing direction, partnering with maybe other partners. So being open and flexible enough to completely change, right, direction. And this requires a persistent commitment, not being afraid of challenge, being open enough to partner, right, with different type of partners, different companies, sometimes even different industries. So I think that is really important to not have to not give up, you know, when things get tough.
Absolutely, and that is easier said than done sometimes, because it's really often described being a startup funder. It's a roller coaster of emotion. It's the super highs and then there's the super lows, but to really manage to persist through the difficult times.
Exactly. I think that's really important. And having a strong network, having a strong team around you, people, advisors that you can trust, people that want to help you. And I think there's so many great people, right, in the industry. So it's making sure that those startups have access to this amazing network or coaching network, so they're not alone. And I think it's also very important for Europe, right? If Europe also wants to stay relevant, I think we need to have a strong innovation ecosystem and startup ecosystem. So we all of us, right? Public sector, private sector, we have a benefit, I think, if we have strong startups or strong health tech industry, right? Or
what do you think the future looks like for the startup ecosystem in Europe in the future?
So I see that the European Union and European Commission, they're investing a lot at the moment, of course, in innovation, right? With the EIC funding and EIT. So I see there's a push towards financing and supporting innovation across Europe. I think now, of course, we're in a critical time, right? Because you have, I think Europe is in competition with the US and Asia as well. And we see like, maybe we are not so strong, so we need to invest more. So that's therefore is the reaction from Europe to invest more. But that's one part, right? It's more investment. I think we also need to think about regulations, right? If we think about specifically for healthcare, but maybe also for other industries, often regulations, they are hampering or slowing down innovation, right? So how can we make sure the regulations are up to date and are modernized or modern enough to also support new innovations coming out of these startups? So these regulations need to be looked at. And of course, also the industry support. So industry, including my own industry like Roche, like how can we support startups in the field, right? So we co-invest, we co-develop with startups. So I think we now tackle one part is the investment part from the European Commission point of view, but now we also need to work on regulations, collaborations with industry, and that the industry is also investing in these startups and in the future.
Absolutely. And this really goes back to what we discussed before, that nothing is possible to do completely alone. It's really being a part of, it's not you against the world, it's we're on this together.
Exactly. And I think the strongest partnerships and success stories will come from, like you say, partnerships. So meaning maybe a private company is working with a startup in a specific country, they have a success story, then they expand together, right? So there's where I think you will find those examples of where a startup is successful when they are partnering with maybe established companies and get support also maybe from the local authorities, right? So if there's like problems with the application or the approval of the solution and from a regulatory point of view, can the local regulations also be adapted, or can they be supportive of changes? So yeah, I think it's this collaboration between different partners, so public, private, and regulators together.
Yeah, all in symbiosis, or in how you should describe it.
Like a symbiosis.
Oh. But before, it have been like a really, really pleasure to talk to you today. I would just, before we wrap up, is there anything you want to add that you feel like we cannot go without saying?
No, I think it's super important, right? Like to start these collaborations, and also, feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to also answer any questions that you have. And I think we need to have more of these initiatives like you're managing now, to support this interaction between public and private sector, right? Like bringing startups together, bringing corporates together. I think it's super important. And from doing this more and more, I think we will create this new partnerships, this ecosystem that is really alive and is working really well. So yeah, hoping to see more of these initiatives also in the future.
Yeah, that's a good note to end it on. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Maritza, and looking forward to stay connected.
You've been listening to European Startup Universe Talks. If you want to know more about us, go to thestartupuniverse.org and follow us on social media.